Mayor Andre Dickens joining us in Chicago, where you are right now for the Democratic National Convention. Thank you so much for coming on with us. We know that your schedule has been super packed. First of all, I want to ask you about the energy in that room. People all across Georgia, we're seeing it play out on TV, but can you explain how it is being in that room every night?
It is electric, as you say. The energy is so high. Everyone is just standing on their feet for all the speakers. People are in the back halls or on the floor or in the suites. Everybody's just talking about how electric it is and how much momentum this campaign has. How excited everybody is about, the progress that's being made with this campaign and the excitement about the future of America with Kamala Harris and Walls as the president and VP. It is fun, lots of music, lots of entertainment. To say the least, it is exciting. I'm just going around from suite to suite and talking to a lot of donors, talking to other mayors and governors and city leaders, et cetera, and country leaders. This is an amazing time to be here and watching history take shape.
And we can't not mention Lil Jon. That was a pretty epic moment during the convention.
Listen, Lil Jon set it off. We won the roll call competition. If there was a competition, for us to have someone that amped up the crowd, making sure everybody knows that Georgia is fully in play and that we're fired up and ready to go. That was exciting. As I've been walking around Chicago or walking around the convention, throughout this week, everybody's asking, or talking about Georgia. We need Georgia. How's it in Georgia? You guys went blue in 2020. Can we count on you for 2024? What's the mood like in Georgia? We're hearing great things about Georgia. All over the place, going around this convention, folks are talking about Atlanta and Georgia.
And it's no doubt that Georgia is always going to make its mark. A lot of people, both on the Democrat and Republican side, have said that the road to the White House is going to go through Georgia. And I want to get to that, talking about the energy in the room, talking about all of this excitement. Just a while ago, we weren't seeing that among Democrats. There was a lot of confusion about what was going to happen with the party. Then we saw President Biden pass the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. We saw a huge speech from her VP pick. But I want to ask you this, with all this excitement right now, is this a temporary sugar high or is this going to last through November? Are we going to see voters show up at the polls?
Yeah, we got 75 days left. This is going to carry all the way through Election Day. This energy is high, the momentum is real, the amount of folks signing up to volunteer, the people that are signing up, of course, to donate. We have seen record numbers, and this is going very well. And this is a sprint, not a marathon at this point. This is a sprint for 75 days. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to be, going all around the United States of America, and particularly battleground states like Georgia, like Pennsylvania, like, Ohio and others. They're going to be there weekly, if not monthly, giving out the message about hope and about the future of America. And people like that message. It's exciting, it's inclusive. And so the whole infrastructure that we have in Georgia from a Democratic Party is going to be on display. We're going to fine tune it to get the message out. You think about that Georgia State University rally that we had with Kamala Harris when she came to town. We had that place rocking. It was filled to the brim. And, all of us were really, touting her record as the Biden-Harris administration and what we know she'll do as the president. And that was before we had a VP pick in Tim Walz. Once we got that elevated it once again. So the Midwest was really pumped up and excited, and good, just good vibes came about after Harris picked Walz. So now you got a good dynamic duo speaking to all Americans, the middle class, talking to individuals that are struggling, helping them see the brighter future. So I'm really, I really believe that this is going to carry on through November.
And coming back to Georgia, Mayor, I want to ask you about just the realistic chance that this ticket has to make it to the White House. Looking at some polls in Georgia here just in the last week, a New York Times Siena College poll still has Trump 3 points ahead. Some polls have him just ahead by 1 point, some as much as 7 points. We know that polls don't vote, people do, but they can be an indicator of how we're doing. You know this from when you were campaigning, right? What can you do? What is your plan to drive not just Democrats who might have had not as much enthusiasm, maybe they have more enthusiasm now, but those undecided voters here in Georgia, and even those Republicans who do not like Trump. They're not Team Trump. They don't like where the Republican Party is going. We saw that with Jeff Duncan at the DNC, right? What is your role to get those voters to come back and vote Democrat in November?
If we are polling right now 1% to 3% down in Georgia on certain polls, I've seen polls that had Kamala Harris neck and neck or even above, but let's just take it at a 1 to 3% deficit between or difference between the two. You're still in the sweet spot, and we're still at the convention, and we have not heard her speech about what she's going to do. And so if you're 1 to 3% down and we're still in the convention, after hearing from Tim Walz last night, I bet you there's another bump. And after hearing from her today, there's another bump. So coming into next week, let's see where those polls are. But as you said, I've been someone who's been, in the poll game before. I went from 4 to 6% in the polls to winning by 64% on election day. So I know that polls don't always indicate what momentum is shifting. And when you got a good message and you got a good candidate and you got the right time and the right energy, then good things can happen. It's exponential, the growth that you're seeing in the Kamala Harris campaign. And so what happens next is, on election day and early voting, you will start seeing people punch her ticket, especially these independents, these undecideds that's out there that did not know who to choose between because they were looking for a certain message, whether it's about freedom of choice and reproductive rights for women. People are understanding what Kamala Harris' position is, which is a freedom, versus where the MAGA Republicans with Donald Trump is, and where we stand on making sure that we have housing affordability, down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. Harris is in favor of that. Donald Trump does not have a message on housing at all about affordability, let alone production. So we're talking about, words and messages that's going to be heard tonight that people are going to gravitate to. I think America is going to see themselves more in a Kamala Harris and Tim Walz administration than they do in a Donald Trump administration that they remember quite well 4 years ago, where he fumbled the ball with respect to the pandemic, where we lost a lot of jobs, we lost a lot of people. Now with Biden Harris, we have this great boom of a stock market, and we also have successful stories of job production and people getting back to work, and then cities are just thriving. We brought down violent crime across America under Biden Harris, and so Harris, being a prosecutor, being a DA, and being an attorney general, someone who knows very well how to make sure that we bring down violent crime, but also criminal justice reform. I think people see the future is brighter with her. So over the next 75 days, we'll be getting that message out across Georgia, across all of the battleground states, and to make sure we hold steady in solidly blue states already.
Mayor Dickens, if I could ask you this, just looking into the past, we know that the political scape has changed so drastically since we had that first debate here in Atlanta. But I want to ask you about it because a lot of the Republican surrogates for Donald Trump, while they were talking about Biden, they were talking about the administration in general, and VP Harris was a part of that administration. Their message to Democrats to try to get them on the Republican ticket is, what have Democrats really done for you? Are you voting Democrat because your parents and your grandparents voted Democrat, or are the Democrats actually doing something for you? Harris says she's going to do all of this stuff, but why haven't they done it in the last 4 years? She has been in the White House under Biden. What is your message to combat that?
Yeah, these guys don't have the ball, so they poke fun at the people that do have the ball and is moving the ball down the field. Biden and Harris have done a tremendously good job at leading this country, particularly from a mayor's perspective. When we come out of COVID after Donald Trump fumbled it and messed it up and was talking about put bleach in your skin to heal COVID, you get the ball in the hands of Biden Harris, and then you get the American Rescue Plan Act. The American Rescue Plan Act, which was voted on largely by Democrats, not supported heavily by Republicans. But guess what? Republican governors, Republican mayors are cutting ribbons and having groundbreakings and showing the results of the American Rescue Plan Act, but they're not calling it that. They're just talking about policies or talking about things that they've done, but they're utilizing the money that comes from the American Rescue Plan Act that was created by Biden Harris. And so when people sit up here and say they haven't done anything, I'm talking about affordable housing developments. I'm talking about things that have supported youth, the programs that we have across Atlanta. I'm talking about things that have helped with our public safety, giving retention bonuses to police officers and stabilizing our cities. I'm talking about things that have worked. The American Rescue Plan Act, we have used that to help families. And that is why we have this tremendous job growth. The bipartisan infrastructure law that passed, it was supposed to be bipartisan. Only a handful of Republicans supported it. But when they go to their hometowns and they see these groundbreakings, they see these big signs of this new project of a road, of a bridge, of a tunnel, of transportation, of a new fire station, or anything else, they're out there shaking hands and doing high five. But the money that's backing that came from the bipartisan infrastructure law that was hatched and designed by Biden Harris. And so these governors and these wannabe presidents did not do anything on infrastructure, and now they're talking about, Biden Harris didn't do anything, but yet they're cutting ribbons or they're breaking ground or they're moving on projects that come out of a bipartisan infrastructure law that was not supported by the majority of the Republicans, all because they wanted to block it because they didn't want Biden Harris to have a win. The same thing around the border, the same thing with Inflation Reduction Act. We're sitting here now with a $30 cap on the cost of insulin because of Biden and Harris. Harris is right there at the table then, and she'll be the leader of the future when she becomes president. And these are the type of policies that go right to the pocketbook and go to the pocketbook of regular folks and to the nation that needs new infrastructure. Biden Harris got it done, so Harris will continue forward. Trump, who had it for 4 years, did nothing, absolutely nothing on infrastructure.
Mayor, if I could ask you one last question. This question doesn't necessarily involve what's happening inside of where you are every night, but outside of where you are. We've seen protesters who are calling on the Biden-Harris administration for the ceasefire deal, for the war going on in the Middle East, similar protests that you've seen right here in your city. These voters, they say that they are very serious. They do not want to support this ticket unless there is an embargo on weapons or an immediate ceasefire. Do you have anything to say to those voters?
Yeah, first of all, we definitely always have to support the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble, freedom to protest. We need protests sometimes to get political figures to pay attention. That happened in the civil rights movement. I've protested as well after George Floyd. So these are American freedoms that we want to protect. What happens is if a protest turns violent, if a protest harms people, harms property, then there has to be consequences for that. We've seen that in the city of Atlanta. Atlanta is a city that constantly has protests, whether it's about women's rights to choose, whether it's about guns, whether it's about Palestine, whether it's about a number of things. I've had protests about any number of city policies. We have protests in the city of Atlanta because we have a large media presence with the cradle of the civil rights movement. I think last year we had over 300 protests that we had to make sure were allowed to get the vote, get their voice out, but also be protected, to also make sure that they don't, violate any laws related to destruction of property or harm of people. We managed 300 protests, and most of those protests did not have any arrests. I mean, the overwhelming majority of them. And so I don't know what's happening outside the gates here in Chicago, other than I know that there are protesters when I walk through. But I definitely, understand that people should have the freedom of speech, and I think that's being allowed out here today. As far as them hearing a message from Biden, from Harris, as it relates to what's been taking place from the Biden-Harris administration, she's called for a ceasefire. Harris has talked about how we have to make sure that Gaza is able to get the nutrition, to get the aid, to get the support that they need. She's definitely tried to be forceful about that. She stood up to Netanyahu, and so I think you're seeing that Harris has a much better message for those individuals that's protesting, a much better message and what you have with Trump Vance, who are solidly never talking about a ceasefire and not talking about providing aid to Gaza. So I was interested to understand how these individuals didn't take their, communication skills to the RNC that was occurring in Milwaukee, how they didn't take the protest to them. If JD Vance and Donald Trump were to win, then they definitely don't get all the things that we're talking about with Harris and the things that these individuals are looking for. We all want an end to this war. We want ceasefire. I want ceasefire. And but beating up Harris about it or making her the problem versus what you're seeing that solidly Trump and Vance will do is a little bit conflicting and confusing to me. So I think that is great to have their voice heard. It's great to make sure they use their First Amendment rights. It's great to continue to push for what you want to see. But at the same time, we don't want political violence. We don't want harm caused to anyone in this process.